Now, up next, our main speaker, Dr. Craig Stark, is a member of Stark Industries, is a professor of neurobiology and behavior and memory and learning researcher at UC Irvine. Dr. Stark will tell us about how memory works if he can remember. Dr. Craig Stark.
Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me here today. That last clip really highlighted one of the reasons why I got into memory research. I mean, memory makes us who we are, and it's our identity, and it's what makes disorders of memory and the loss of memory so incredibly profound. So what I'm going to be talking to you, though, about is not the loss of memory in things like, well, Alzheimer's disease and dementia, but what happens in our daily lives and the gap between how we actually remember events and perhaps what really happened. I mean, if you were to think about yesterday, hopefully you can remember what happened yesterday. If you didn't, please see me afterwards, and I'll have a study or two for you. But as you start to think back, what about, a week or so ago? What about a month? What about a year? How well can you actually remember those events? And I'm going to be coming back to this quote here by Frederick Bartlett. I'll highlight a couple bits for you because I can see it's not all that legible up here. But he said that in 1932, he said, memory is not the re-excitation of innumerable fixed lifeless ideas and fragmentary traces. We don't write like this anymore, but he says it's not pulling back a whole bunch of things that were etched in stone. No, instead, it's an imaginative reconstruction or construction built out of our attitudes, our biases, our experiences. So basically, we're making it up. And that's how he said fundamentally that memory actually works. But we think that it works differently. We think that if we had some traumatic event, or we had some wonderful event, the birth of a child, we could remember it like it was yesterday. But I'm here to tell you that's not actually the way it works. So this is an important kind of thing. It happens all the time, and we've seen it now in the news a whole heck of a lot. From Ferguson, where you have eyewitnesses who come up with very, very different accounts of what actually happened, to, of course, helicopter rides, or memories of the Falkland Islands, or to show it's not just the last month or so, this is Hillary Clinton. She had in 2008 a memory of a 1996 plane landing in Bosnia that turned out to be, since of course we actually had the videotape, decidedly different than what her memory actually had. So are these people lying? I mean, look, people do lie. Yes, we know that. However, it's also the case that there are times in which our memory just really doesn't line up at all with what actually happened. I mean, take the witnesses in Ferguson. Some of them admitted later on, yeah, I totally changed my story on that. Other ones, though, completely held to their beliefs that, yes, in fact, this is what they saw, and yet they have decidedly different accounts. So it may very well not actually have anything to do with a lie. So researchers like me have known this kind of thing for a long time. We've seen that there's a real disconnect between what actually happened and your memory for what happened. And I can actually demonstrate that to you, I think, pretty quickly here in this little following video clip.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
Anyone notice a change or two? Yeah, one.
Clearly,
you felt pretty good about yourself, huh?
Murdered Lord Smythe, who, At precisely 3:34
There goes
this
the
afternoon,
tablecloth, there
was
goes the
brutally
chair, the
bludgeoned to death
plants.
with a blunt instrument.
Wait
I
for
want
it, there
each of
goes
you
the
to
body,
tell me your whereabouts
bear.
at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
His jacket changes, there
I
he
was
goes.
polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
What she's
I
holding
was buttering
changes,
his
this
lordship's
changes.
scones below stairs.
Of course, there's our new body.
But I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
All right, so this is from an ad in the UK saying, watch out for cyclists. It's a PSA, and well, yes, we should watch out for cyclists. But to me, that's not the big point, actually, of this. I have a different take-home message, and my take-home message is that your memory works in a fundamentally different way than a lot of us think. You held on to the gist. It's a murder mystery, it's a clue kind of thing, and a couple of details. If your memory really worked like a video recorder, such that this got etched into your brain, it would have been the case as the camera pans back across, you would have said, well, wait a minute, what happened to the big bear? All of a sudden now there's a suit of armor there, and that's a different body. You didn't notice that. You didn't notice that because your memory held the gist and a few outstanding details, which is exactly what Frederick Bartlett said in 1932. That's how our memory worked. If in fact it was a little green space alien all of a sudden that replaced the bear and was dancing around and doing the Macarena or something, you would have noticed that because that wouldn't have lined up with the gist. But these details here are very, very malleable. So you hold on to the gist and you don't actually have the details. Now, this kind of notion here is something that we as researchers have known for a good long time. But if you ask the general public, there's this disconnect. And to me, that's the fundamental problem. It's not that our memory isn't perfect, it's there's a disconnect between what we think our memory can actually do and what it really does. So this basic study has been done dozens of times, and they do things like they ask people the following questions, like, human memory works like a video camera, accurately recording the events we see and hear so that we can review and inspect them later. Do you agree or disagree with that statement, and if so, how strongly? Ask the general public, say folks like you, and you'll see about 65% of the folks end up saying that yes, in fact, I agree with this statement in some way, shape, or form, strongly or not. All right, 65% go along with that, 35% disagree. You ask memory experts, people like me who do this for a living, 0. Not a single one endorse it. The only thing we disagree about is how vehemently we disagree with this statement. And that's it. I mean, look, 95% of us are like, yeah, we strongly disagree with this. And the rest of us, well, mostly, because we have to be open to lots of possibilities and all this kind of thing. Sure, all right. So we see these kinds of breakdowns. Now, the public and memory researchers have these very, very different views. Why is it that the memory experts actually think that it's so bad? Well, remember that quote from Frederick Bartlett? That was in 1932. We've known about this for a long time. In fact, 1932, I mean, that's actually pretty recent in terms of how long we've known some of these things. This is Hermann Ebbinghaus. Ebbinghaus taught himself lists of words or nonsense words and would get himself up to 100% on these things. He was the first guy to empirically test memory. And then after, he would do things like say, okay, now let's just wait like 20 minutes or an hour or a day and test my memory for these words. What he found here is he traced out this curve. This is an hour. Two interesting things. One is that, well, after an hour, you've lost half of the information. It's gone. The other interesting thing is that the most rapid rate of forgetting is right after it happened. Look, the difference between 2 days and a month isn't all that much. You're still losing some, but the difference between immediate and a day is incredible. So we know that our memory has all of these kinds of issues. We've seen this kind of thing. So right now, let's try to actually see what your memory is like. Obviously, I'm the one who made you study those words before, so take it out on me. What I'd like you to try to do right now is I'd like you to try to recall those words. Try to remember as many of them as possible. Seriously, try to remember them. You don't say them out loud, but try to think right now. I'm going to give you 30 seconds or so to try to actually do this. Oh, perfectly in order. No, any ones you can remember is just fine. All right, so I gave you a little bit of time here. I know it's a challenging sort of thing, so let's just do a little bit of audience participation style scoring on this. Raise your hand if right there you thought of, or now that I'm asking you here, you know as they were rattling off in your head, you would have come up with a glass. About 15, 20 or so. How about rest? 8 maybe. Shade? 15 or 20 or so. How about wait? How about sleep? Whoa, 40 or so. That was a lot of hands. How about wake? Oh, pretty good on that, about 30 or 30 plus or so on that. How about curtain? Another about this 15, 20 kind of thing. How about snore? Another about that 15, 20. How about window? Whoa, that's like half y'all got window. All right, how about screen? Huh, okay, another about maybe 10, 15 or so on that one. All right, so there was a kind of pattern here. There were a lot that were in like the 10, 15, maybe 20, and then there were a couple that people actually seemed to do really well on. I mean, that was sleep and window. Raise your hand if you got either sleep or window, or both of them. Yeah, that's at least 2/3, if not 3/4 of everybody in here. Now, I actually knew this was going to happen, because I've done this like word list over and over again. I've given this talk some number of times, and I use this demo a number of times. In fact, I use it so many times, and it's so reliable that I can set my presentation up so that it's automatically going to highlight sleep and window. That's how well I know this works, and it's not some prescient sort of thing. Because I showed you a whole bunch of words and all this kind of thing. I showed you glass, I showed you rest, but sleep and window stand out because they're different. Because of everything that's up there, those are the only two that were not on the study list. Yeah. You got door, glass, pane, shade, ledge, sill, house, open curtain, frame, view, breeze, sash, screen, and shutter, but you didn't get window. You got bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, wake, snooze, blanket, doze, slumber, snore, nap, peace, yawn, and drowsy, but you didn't actually get sleep. Okay, but this happens. It's a powerful, powerful effect. You may be saying to yourself, but come on, look, sleep should have been on that list. I read you everything but the word sleep. Yeah, it should have been on there. But that's the point. Why should it have been on there? It should have been on there because Frederick Bartlett was right in 1932. It's your prior biases, expectations, and experiences. That's why it should have been on there, and Zymergy shouldn't have been on there, because I read you everything but that. So you fill in those kinds of details all the time. Okay, so memory is a reconstructive process. If you think it should have happened, you probably think that it did actually happen. So okay, this is just party tricks and anecdotes and all this kind of thing, right? Well, no. Here's some data from Elizabeth Loftus, one of the many studies that she'd done on it. She's also down at UCI, one of my colleagues. She showed people a video of a white car driving along a country road. And then after everybody watched this video, she asked them one of two questions. Either how fast was the white car going while on the country road, or how fast was the white car going while it passed the barn on the country road? Okay, so in all of this, of course, the trick is there was no barn. People watch the video, they watch the same video, you bring them back a week or so later, and you say, hey, what did you see? Well, in this case here, how fast was it going? We see that 3% of the people report having seen a barn. Over here, 17%. Almost 6 times as many people report seeing a barn just by having this one leading kind of question. Okay. So, but here I'm trying to mess with your memory. I'm doing party tricks. I'm doing all sorts of things like this. So, all right, what if we don't present this kind of thing? You know, if it's an actual traumatic event, that'll be spared, right? Well, people have a notion that there's this flashbulb memory. You have some horrible event that happens that you witness, and you get this emotional arousal, and it leads to this indelible memory. So you can say, I remember it like it was yesterday. But remember, Hermann Ebbinghaus said that yesterday really isn't all that good. But in any case, it's supposed to be that you're going to relive this kind of event, and that is complete and accurate and immune to forgetting in a snapshot. But the problem is, these things here aren't actually true. Yes, it is the case you have rapid one-shot learning, but it's not immune to forgetting, and it's not this kind of thing. I'll give you one example of this with September 11th. They interviewed people a week or so, within a week of September 11th, and asked them all sorts of questions. How did you hear about it? Who were you with? Et cetera, et cetera. We're going to call this the truth. And then they went on and said, okay, look, let's just let time go past and interview them again. This is 3,000 people across 7 cities, including New York, so they could look at all sorts of things, like if you had a personal loss, if you lived in New York, how emotionally salient you rated all these things. What they found when they compared the two accounts was that 40% of the details were completely different at the second time point. And it didn't matter whether you lived in New York City. It didn't matter whether you had a personal loss. None of those things actually mattered. Maybe you got a little bit more information in to begin with, but it still had all of these problems. It wasn't immune to forgetting, and you had all of those kinds of issues there. Okay, this isn't just things like New York City. I've had people come up to me and tell me stories of things like they were in a car that was actually, robbed at gunpoint, that they had somebody come to their house, soldiers come to their house and tell them that their son had been lost in Afghanistan, and that they find out afterwards that, you know what, even though they've been telling the story and thinking about it for years, a number of those details were actually different. And the problem is probably that they've been telling the story for years. So these kinds of things happen, and they happen to us all. Okay, but what if you're really confident? How will this confidence play in this? You can tell where I'm going with this. But before I get there, let me talk about Amazon. I'm going to talk about Amazon.com here, because let's say that you're in the market for a new TV. And you find a TV on Amazon that has 3,000 reviews, and the average review is 4.5 stars. You're going to buy that TV. Because you know to get 4.5 stars, it's got to be really, really good, a whole bunch of 5 stars. And you also know there's always going to be some Yahoo out there who's going to do something like, well, the TV was great, but the UPS guy delivered it to the dude next door. Fail, 1 star. And you at least intuitively know it takes a whole bunch of 5s to counteract that 1 to keep it up at 4.5. And yeah, it takes 7 5s to counteract that. And I bring that up because in that September 11th study, they had people rate their confidence on a scale of 1 to 5. It's the 5-star system. You can't give it a 6. And across those 3,000 people and the dozens of memories each, the average confidence rating was 4.5. Incredibly high confidence, even though almost half of the details of their memory are completely wrong. So, where are we on this? None of this is abnormal. This is actually how memory works, and people like me have known this for a good long time. I've been doing memory research and looking at the neurobiology of memory for about 25 years or so now, and I've never seen anything in the neurobiology of memory that says anything any differently. Things do not get stuck into our head in such a way that we'll be able to perfectly pull them back later on. What went in wasn't perfect. We'll view the world differently as a result of our biases and expectations and experiences. And certainly then when it comes back, it goes through that filter again. And then when you bring it back, you stick it in your memory again, perhaps with this distortion, and it can keep changing and keep changing. I mean, if I show you a video here, somebody robbing a liquor store, goes flying out of the store, gun in one hand, wad of cash in the other. I say, hey, what'd you see? Yeah, this young guy came flying out of a liquor store. How do you know it's a young guy? You know it's a young guy, not based on what you see, but on your expectations. Little old ladies don't rob liquor stores, at least by and large. At least they don't go flying out with a gun in one hand, wad of cash in the other, dashing down the street. So you assume then it's a young guy. So memory is a lot like this. It's like that classic fish trope. You tell that you caught a fish and you tell the story that it's this big. In reality, it was about that big. But the problem in all of this here is that in your memory, it's not this big. It's not this big, but in your memory, it's probably at least this. Because each time you retrieve it, each time you retell that story, it's open to this notion of distortion here. And the big problem, as I say, is not that this distortion happens, it's that we don't appreciate that it happens. So in terms of memory's errors here, just to sort of sum everything up, we not only forget, we generalize and believe things happen that are similar to things that actually happen. Misinformation or distorting kind of information presented after the fact becomes a part of our memory, and we have absolutely no way of trying to get that out. This happens automatically, though. It's not just misinformation. Every time you retell it, it can open to this problem. Eyewitnesses are open to this. Jurors are open to this. In conversations with your spouse, you are open to this. We are all open to this because this isn't abnormal. It's how an adaptive memory system actually works. It's there to let us go forward and be adaptive in our lives. And if we gloss over details, that's probably a good thing because it lets us generalize. It's a good thing that our memory does it, but in our dealings with each other and certainly in the courts, we need to own up to the fact that this is the kind of thing that happens. Thank you very much.
That was awesome and frightening.
Sunday Assembly Los Angeles. Live better, help often, and wonder more.